Yeah, it's kind of exciting to talk in English, having this kind of uh, meeting on conversation.
Yes, so hello, Ilmari. Now we are recording.
Hello, Robert. Yeah, I
It's
was
interesting
wondering
how we met.
what.
It is interesting how we met through like these different
Yeah.
things, like related with the boat that your dad built, I guess. Or no, that your dad was inspired by in Canada.
Mm, yeah, it's a kind of funny, funny paths crossing.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that if you would like to in some way introduce yourself or tell something about you or your life so far, if something comes to mind you would like to share in terms of that.
Yeah, I guess yeah, should I start with something or will you want to ask a question or should I start with my birth?
Well, what
Right.
feels good for you, I guess. Yeah.
I am close to my birthplace right now here in Frankfurt. I was born down just like 5 minute walk from here
Mm.
in the 60s. In the wake of the Kennedy assassinations by the CIA.
Oh, so yeah.
Maybe that's why they gave me the name Robert. I don't know.
Ah, true, true.
They were Kennedy fans, my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I lived here for a few years, 4 or 5 years. My brother was born here, only one brother. And then we moved to northern Germany where my dad was working for Volkswagen. And my parents they were both refugees basically from Second World War as children with their families, they left the areas where they were born. My
Mm.
mom is from Gdansk, born there, and my dad is from the part that's now in the Czech Republic, near the Polish border. And his family, they were still farmers. So the farm was left behind, never really used again. We went there once in the 90s to look at it, but my dad couldn't find it anymore. So we needed the help of a local in that village. And they remembered the name, our last name, and they knew the place and they showed us where it was.
Okay.
So
Have
50, 60 years, a lot of things change.
yeah. Have you uh, or how has mm, Polish or Czech Czechish mm, have they felt anywhere near you? Yeah. Uh, as
Well, my both my parents they were not Czech or Polish. They were
okay.
German. So that was like a German speaking area before the war. Both like Gdansk was like a German city then, and that area where my dad's from is, I think there was like that whole mountain area between eastern part of Germany and Czech Republic, and also between Poland and uh, and Czech Republic. That was 2 million people of German. Kind of like the people in Ukraine. You have the division of the Russian people and the Ukrainians. Although you could say like their language is a lot closer than German and Polish language or German and Czech language. But
Yeah.
still, there's still some similarities in that some predominant group that takes over like after the First World War, as in the case with my father's homeland, that was never part of Germany. That was before the First World War. It was Hungarian, Austrian Empire, and so were a lot of other parts of Europe, like in Romania, and I think maybe even in Ukrainian parts, they were actually Austrian Hungarian, like the western part of Ukraine and what is Poland now. And I mean, I'm not sure all the boundaries, and but they were German speakers, and then when after the First World War, they were given basically under Czech supervision, and somehow were not as well liked as. So they had disadvantages. They were. It wasn't fair to for all these different minorities to have the same access to maybe jobs and whatever. I from what I've gathered. So they saw it as an advantage for them when Hitler came over there and freed them from that oppression.
Right.
But then, of course, then it goes the other way again for other minorities. So it's always someone that's, except in Switzerland, it seems to be working quite well. You know, there are 4 different languages, like your also Germans, French, Italians, and then there's some old Roman language in some mountain valleys. They have some group that's like a language that's related to the old Roman, but also with influence of the German and other languages nearby. Rätoromanisch. So they seem to manage quite well. No one seems to be trying to take over, like try to throw the Germans out or forbid the German language. You know, so only Italian is to be spoken now in Switzerland. I mean, if they did that, like the Germans, they would say, "Oh, let's go be part of Germany or Austria. We'll get out."
Yeah, they've done something right there. Yeah.
So that's what's going on over there, I guess, in Ukraine right now, or for the last 15 years, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can kind of understand how these people react that are they when they want to outlaw their language, you know, they want to take their language education away from the school curriculum.
Yeah.
They're not happy about that.
No, definitely.
But yeah, so I mean, I could say still about this war thing and that they were refugees, that it's still even, I mean, it has still affected my life too, right? I mean, in the on one hand, I wouldn't exist in this form if they hadn't been refugees and met here in this area near Frankfurt or in Frankfurt, my parents, as it is. But on the other hand, also because of that, I don't really have like such a strong sense of home for a place because we did also move around, and then we moved to Africa for 6 years when I was eight, and then we came back when I was 14. So, well, my parents for themselves decided this was their new home, and this is where they, and also my mom, she's like that. She likes it here, and but for me and my brother, we both kind of didn't get that sense because we were gone too long from Frankfurt. So my brother lives in Norway, right? And I live in Finland.
Yeah. So you weren't, or your roots were not that deep in one place, and
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
it's been more, how would I say, well, easy or move around, or it's been more natural. It's not been
Yeah.
something to that holds you in one place. That
Mm.
right.
Yeah, following some, I don't know, some intuitions or uh, past life stuff. Who knows? I don't know if you have thought or come across any of these ideas that we live life after life, we come back, we
Mm,
fulfill like maybe a mission or some of some sort.
yeah, I've been thinking those topics too.
Because I cannot explain why I was drawn to the north so much. I don't have any,
Mm,
like some people, they have these memories. Oh yeah, I was like this happened to me in a past life and that, and maybe they go to a regression and they get in a trance and then they can kind of remember this sort of stuff or traumatic events even from this life, whatever. But I don't know. I can't say I have any of these kind of recollections. It's more like I remember when we were in Africa we had a German school there in Nigeria and German teachers. And we were basically learning the same kind of things that they had in the same school books like they had in Germany. And then we turn the page and it's about the Arctic Circle and reindeers and the midnight sun. I still remember like the book was like double page and on the top of the page there was 24 pictures of the sun in you know but never below the horizon in the summer. It doesn't set. So that kind of thing. And then I was like, oh, I must go there. But
yeah.
other things that we read about, like the Amazon Indians that were attacking the bulldozers with blow darts and arrows when they were building roads through the jungle, I was sympathizing with them. So also there's something that I don't know why would I sympathize with them, but I still never felt like I wanted to
Mm,
move there or go. Oh, I must go there. I must help them or something, and nothing like that. It was just kind of like, okay, right on. They know what they want, and that should be their right. It's their place. Why are we destroying that? But so those kind of things, I feel like, okay, that's kind of maybe giving me some hints that because I can't explain
mm,
why would I go to this cold place instead
yeah.
of the warm place, where most people want to go to the warm place rather.
Yes, those are interesting. Uh, I've had similar kinds of points in life. I think, or two uh, areas or mm, these native people who come to my mind is Native Americans, Indians, and then then again the well, yeah, Japan, something around there. And it's
Have you been there to Japan? Have you traveled to Japan?
no, I haven't yet, at least, but maybe the first touch from there is mm, when I started to practice karate in my childhood. It's it's from one of the, was it Okinawa Island, around there,
Okay.
and after that there's been some other interesting or sparkling aspects of that culture.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, I also find them kind of fascinating in some ways. But I also never felt like I needed to go there.
Mm.
I watch videos about Japanese craftsmen and that kind of stuff on YouTube, you know, how they are working stone or wood or these kind of things. So
Right. Uh,
quite fascinating their approach to that sort of thing.
Indeed. You
Well, and
mentioned.
of course, your dad, he was interested in that sort of thing as well. When I think about it, you know, like not Japanese, but like the Chinese topic. There was something about the Chinese thing, because why would someone in Finland all of a sudden discover like Chinese craftsmanship or way of building boats and sailing that, you know, that
Mm,
very few people in Finland even know about it.
yeah, that's mm, now that I think about it, uh, it there could very well be something that he had or he have uh, drawn from something ancient knowledge, you could say,
Hmm.
uh, about creating that type of mm, sail sail system and that there's there's a lot of things uh, on the or in Asia around there. I could say, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you don't have a brother, right?
No, I
But
don't.
yeah. So it's interesting in some ways that my brother is also up in the north, but he's quite different from me in other ways.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Well, another thing. So anyway, we came back from Africa. We went back to the northern part of Germany, where my dad was still working for Volkswagen, and then they returned here. But for me, the return was quite interesting because in that time I had met a person in school. Like the first, I remember that person still. I get introduced to the new school. You know, we're coming back from Africa in the middle of the school year before the summer, sometime in March, maybe even. So and then I'm getting the school director takes me to my new class, and I open the door, and then, of course, in the middle of the class, the door doesn't open just like that, and so everyone looks who's coming in, and all the people are looking at me. And one guy, he had these Coke bottle glasses, you know, like 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 magnifying glass. So like, of course, those eyes were the biggest.
Okay.
And that ended up being my best friend from those 2 years after we got from back from Africa, and together we were both a bit different, I guess, and not the mainstream in a way. We had our own interests and didn't care so much about what the others were thinking, perhaps. Just short of being the ones getting mobbed, kind of thing, you know.
Okay.
Sitting in our own corner, doing our own thing
Mm.
alone. And so when my parents decided now we're moving to Frankfurt because my dad had gotten a new job, also still with Volkswagen related things where they wanted to be, then my friend and I, we were gearing up to go we were 16, getting on a trip to Lapland. Not, no, actually not to Lapland, but to northern central Sweden near the Norwegian border. We had found like, you know, catalogs about things to do, and you could rent canoes. So back in those days, there was no email, just
Mm.
phones and writing letters. So we maybe wrote a letter and then called or something, and we had arranged to rent a canoe for about 3 weeks at the Norwegian border, and then paddle down to Strömsund from there. That was my first time then in the north, like after having read about it, like maybe 2, 3, 4 years before in the geography book. And so we went there, did that trip, which is kind of a pivotal moment, you could say. But then in the meantime, when after the 3 weeks, when I returned back to Germany with the train, like we'd taken a train up there, which takes about 2 days, then I didn't return to the northern part of Germany, Wolfsburg, the city of Wolfsburg, but I returned to Frankfurt. So my parents and brother, they had all packed up and moved in the time that I was gone out in the bushes. So I only had to pack up my stuff, and then it appeared again in another city after the trip.
Yeah, what a
Easy move.
surprise. Oh, so you
But
start your or began your journeys up north quite early.
yeah, and it was interesting also because I was the first. Well, I had somehow I always felt like the environment deserved some protection or more protection than it receives. And in that age, you think about maybe what they ask you maybe at school. Okay, well, what would you be interested in doing for work when you grow up? And they offered everyone could take a practicum, like a practice at some profession maybe that I was interested. So for 3 weeks, I was prior to this trip, I was playing with the idea, oh, maybe I could become a forester. I could be out in the nature and help protect forests. I thought that's what they did, like they managed the forests also for the nature somehow, not just for human money interests. And so I was for 3 weeks in the forest, getting taken around by the boss chief forester, and dropped off in the forest with some Austrian woodcutters and learning how they do their work, and building or others building fences to protect from wild boars, these pigs digging up everything when they planted trees. And so it was kind of interesting, and I thought maybe that could be a thing for me. And then coming to Sweden, where I had this idea that was still kind of quite a wild place with lots of nature left, which it kind of was even then, more than it is now even. But still, looking at these maps and planning a trip, and like, oh, there's no roads. Let's find a place where there's little roads and not so much people, and it's painted in green on the map. It's like, oh, it's forest everywhere, and then there's some mountains sticking up out of this forest sheet. That's where we need to go. So we went there, and also so we paddled down these lakes, and then we camped out with a tent, and then decided that, well, we want to see the mountains also. So we walked 30 kilometers on one day, well, 15 to get up to a mountain, on following these roads and trails that were drawn on our map that was quite a large scale. So it was not like a very good, not a topographic map, but so that's all we had though in those days for there. And then we were sort of felt like these Amazon Indians in their territory. That one day they come on one of their trails and they put the bushes like this, and then like, what is that? So we came on this hiking trail, and all of a sudden there was like what looked like a superhighway. What? This is like 30 meters wide. Like, you can hardly see the other side. Where does the trail continue? Like, what is it doing here? I was kind of shocked, and obviously we had already seen a little bit like where the modern day forestry had like basically cut everything in sight, like huge areas that they cut down in a single go. Like it would take a few days or a week or whatever in those days. And that was a shock, like, and I saw more and more of that. And I don't understand how other people can't see this kind of thing. I've even a few years ago, I still met people hitchhiking up in the northern part of Lapland after a mountain trip, hitchhiking back to the car around the mountains and getting rides with people, and they're looking out the window and they just see like, oh, it's so wild here, oh, it's all green and that's it, you know, they just think it's, and I only see the destruction. Like, oh, that's just young trees. I mean, what do you mean? They cut this down 20 years ago. It's all dead. So I was talking about that, how I was first introduced to industrial forestry and
Mm.
the destructive, incredibly destructive activities that they have everywhere around the world. So after the canoe trip ended, we went to Östersund, where the train to Germany would go back basically via Stockholm. And then we had some time, and I decided I'm gonna have to talk to those guys. You know, that's not good what they're doing over there. So I found out where's the forest company offices, and so I went in there like 16-year-old, and I said, "Hey, you got to stop that. That's not good." You know, I mean, I felt like an expert. I had been 3 weeks with the foresters in Germany. You know.
Okay, brave stuff.
So they took me in there and they talked to me. Well, they kind of, well, we have to do this, you know, this kind of efficiency and blah and blah. We have to do like that. So they had all their reasons, obviously, but they didn't convince me, and they haven't convinced me to this day that what they're doing is a good thing. It's like, I mean, I just feel it in my soul, in my heart, when I go through like these cut areas. This seems so crazy. You know, where they come with their machines and take everything. And nowadays, it's so quick. You know, like you go like even on Åland. I drive to Mariehamn, and in the afternoon I come back and like some whole forest might be gone.
Mm.
And then I'm thinking like, okay, well, in my lifetime, it will never be a forest again there. Not what you could call a forest. So, and I don't know how feel people like that own, and it's all privately owned land on Åland. So people that own these forests, they don't have a connection with the land. It's totally gone. The connection to, I couldn't do that. You know, if that was my land, I would have. I think I would have a stronger connection to the land than to the money.
Mm.
So I'm thinking like if I had a lot of money, like some amazing people, they ended up with a lot of money, and then they felt like more, well, money, what is it worth? You know, so we'll spend it. And so they did like this Douglas Tompkins. If you heard of him, as I think he was an American entrepreneur who made his money with the North Face company, then making climbing gear and equipment, and also he had like big investments, or founder of Esprit, the clothing company. And he took most of his money, all of it maybe, and spent it in huge amounts of land that they bought in South America and Chile. Like they bought like an area the size of Åland with all the water that of Åland to make a park, like a save it from destruction, like in the middle of Chile, like this fjordland country. It's called Pumalin. 7,000 square kilometers, I think, something like that. Massive. This divided the whole country from the seawater to the Argentinian border in two. So there's the Chile that's north of the park, and there's the Chile south of the park. Fascinating. So if I had a lot of Bitcoin, which I don't, this summer Sirpa and I, we bought a property that we did the same thing kind of. We bought some land that Sirpa, she was looking for an apartment to buy in Åland, and then she saw, hey, they're selling our swimming hole, the place where we go swimming. And I was like, oh no, why did you have to tell me this? Now I have to figure out how do we stop this, or can we buy it
Mm.
so no one can build a house there?
Sure.
So we did, and interesting, they were really nice people that sold it. But if they had bought Bitcoin, which they had, like when it was still like nothing, like I couldn't believe it. They were telling us, yeah, I owned, the lady that sold us the property. She used to own 20,000 Bitcoin.
Really?
20,000. So I calculated with the current worth of the Bitcoin, it's basically 2 billion euros, you know.
Oh,
You think
oh.
you would have bought, you think you would have sold the property next to your house where you live, so just not knowing who's going to do what there? If you had 20, if you had 2 billion euros, I think you wouldn't. Like but they still made money, I guess, in the day when they decided, oh, we don't know what this game is, this Bitcoin. I don't know, we trust it, so they sold it again. So they probably had made some profit, but then they kind of maybe kicked themselves at seeing it go up and up and up and up, and still no end in sight.
Well, great to hear that you got that piece of a land.
I know, but then I'm kind of broke. So, but even if I had bought just a few years ago, I was playing with the idea, okay, I would like to have an electric car, produce my own electricity, then I can fill up the batteries with my electricity, and even though I don't believe the CO2 bullshit anymore, but I still think it's a good idea to be autonomous, as much as possible. But I don't know. So if I had spent that money instead of buying this electric car made in Finland, the Think City in Norway, where it was a Norwegian company, but they were assembled at Valmet in Finland. Isn't that also what your dad's boat motor is, a Valmet?
Yeah, yes.
The best. Yeah, so that car is always broken, and I hadn't had much use of it. It was just kind of an interesting experience. But in that year, I was talking to everyone about this Bitcoin stuff, and in Norway while I was there. And then I ended up, instead of buying Bitcoin, I bought that stupid car. But if I had taken that same money and actually bought the Bitcoin then, I would have had buckets of money, even at the already relatively high price of entering that thing. Could have bought more properties, more forest, that kind of thing. And seems like a worthwhile thing to collect, like stuff like that, like properties along the shore, for example, where people just sell them so people can build cabins, just snap them up. And especially if you imagine you had 22 billion euros in Bitcoin, I mean, you could buy all of Åland. Every time some piece of land came up for sale, someone wants to sell something so you can have a little bit of extra cash. And you're always the highest bidder because you don't care if it's like if you put another 20,000 euros just to be higher than the other one. And then you don't do anything with it. You just collect it. And eventually, maybe when you die, you give it to the Finnish state if they give you the promise that they keep it as a park for everyone. That's what that guy did, that guy Douglas Tompkins there, and he had set up some kind of a trust, and then they gave, I think they donated that whole big thing to the Chilean nation if they promised that they wouldn't develop it, to take care of it instead. Unfortunately, the guy died in a kayaking accident. He capsized on a lake there on one of his land pieces there, I guess, and died from hypothermia.
Okay.
Cold water. He was maybe in his 60s or something. Must have been at least 10 years ago when he died.
Yeah.
Well, kind of inspiring, kind of these sort of things, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Nice to hear these examples of using the power to good purposes, one could say.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's also kind of a little bit of like a red line through my life when I remember back in this geography book, thinking about the Amazon jungle and the Trans-Amazon Highway being built through there, and the Indians coming out of the forest and trying to fight the bulldozers with the arrows. And that when I read about this Tompkins guy, then I feel like the same sort of thing. I totally get it, what the guy is trying to do. I mean, you could, of course, if you always get to a point where maybe even with your money you can't prevent certain things if it's not enough money and enough management abilities or foresight, what to do. And because what would be the point if you bought in certain areas like the Amazon, if you could maybe buy a huge piece of land and then on paper be the owner, but if you don't have an army of rangers and people that can help you protect it from illegal gold miners and timber miners and all these people coming in there, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, I think it was Simon Reeves documentary series located to or in South America, different countries there, and it was quite shocking to see some of those gold mining things, or there were also other aspects, but yeah, they are quite crazy.
Mm. Yeah. And a lot of things we don't even know about these areas yet. Amazing. If you ever come across Graham Hancock, this British journalist who talks a lot about ancient civilizations, and he's piecing together like newer research, also like from other fields, not just archaeology, but also geosciences and what is known about, like large events like asteroid hits on Earth, how they impact maybe prehistoric cultures or cultures, yeah, we don't know anything about, except that they have left some amazing stuff behind that we can't explain, like the pyramids and the stuff that's built down in South America. Because I think one of the things that he was talking about, he mentioned how when the first gold conquistadors, when they went over the Andes and then found the headwaters of the Amazon and floated down, how they described that there were some amazing civilizations there, but they all got wiped out after them because they spread all sorts of diseases that they had no immunity against somehow. But now
Yeah,
it's confirmed in a way because people finding stuff over large areas like deep soil that has since been overgrown by the jungle again, but allegedly they had millions of people living there. Not like these, quite unlike the people that are living there now in the remaining jungle, like the uncontacted. I mean, there's still 100 and so uncontacted Indian tribes in South America. They have no contact with our type of way of living, Western way of living.
yeah. I've just actually been reading this older book, this Döniken author about
Däniken,
yeah
German guy.
yeah the did we come behind the stars, or what's the name of the book? It's it's been really fascinating. So many.
Erich von Däniken.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, it's fascinating. That was a guy digging into the stuff. I don't think I've ever read one of his books, but they've been kind of around when I was growing up.
Mm,
Don't I have even had one book, but I kind of only later became more interested in these sort of things. And nowadays, people are digging like way deeper into this stuff
mm,
maybe than what he did. I don't know. Maybe some of his ideas or some of his conclusions, they could be doubted, but that's not the point. Maybe the point is more like there's a lot of things out there that we don't know anything about,
yeah.
or we have totally false assumptions.
Mm. Well, I was thinking about when you mentioned about intuition and something along those lines, that did you remember having some point during those years you mentioned when you were 16 or something, that was there any point that you felt some calling to more strongly, or became feeling anything inner in, yeah, how could I describe it, but
Sure, in some ways, but I'm still a bit lost, I guess.
right.
I still don't know what I will do when I grow up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were some things that led to the next step. Sometimes they were quite strong events. Like I mean, I went to Alaska. You knew that, right? That I lived in Alaska for 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah, when I was here in Frankfurt, I started going to university and I was studying geosciences like geography, physical geography, but also some anthropology because that was always fascinating to me. What people were doing in the environments that they lived in and how they made their tools and what they out of simplest things, how they could create boats and this kind of stuff. So even as a kid, I built like one tiny little boat, like out of copper wire that I had found in Nigeria. On we were we're living by the sea there, or like a lagoon. It's like brackish water with tides, and we'd always explore and walking along the shore there, past other house properties, and there was always also stuff lying there, garbage and whatever. And so we found also like electric cables, and we stripped the plastic off the wires, and then out comes this shiny copper, right? It's like wow, it's like gold. And but so we made things out of the copper, like because we didn't have access to like unlimited amounts of toys, like our like maybe friends that grew up in Germany. In between trips that the parents maybe took on a plane to go to some business meeting back to Germany, we'd have to fend for ourselves and make things out of whatever we find. Cardboard was turned into houses, and copper wire was turned into roofing beams, like holding other layers of cardboard as floors for little Playmobil guys to walk around and then fight each other, whatever. But so I also built like a little boat out of basically like a wire cage. You know how the corks on top of the champagne bottles or prosecco bottles, they
Right.
have this little thing to hold the cork in there. And so if
Yeah.
you can imagine, you could cover that wire cage with some fabric, and then you have some vessel. So a little bit expand that a little bit, make it like a little shape that's kind of like a boat, and then you stretch like some kind of fabric on it, so you have a boat. So I kind of built a skin boat when I was a kid, like that.
All right.
But also my dad had carved here back in Germany when I was even younger out of bark from a maybe poplar or a big pine, like carved a little boat, and I always had that, and I always found it fascinating. And then I lost it somehow, but I kept looking for it, like after these different moves, like somehow it disappeared and moving from Africa to Germany, and I always kind of wondered where it was and where it disappeared to, but somehow there's that little bit of beginnings of building boats or being interested in building boats. So when I then became a student of physical geography, then after 4 years here, moving to Alaska to on a scholarship, study there for 1 year, during the time I kind of didn't feel like I wanted to continue in that vein of science or that way of looking at the world, and those became interested more in this building things out of wood, and also during that time when I was building a log cabin for a friend. So I'd never done anything like that, but then I started building like little log houses, or one little log house, and I think it was during that time I I went to the library there in Fairbanks, and I saw an article in the canoeing magazine about some guy who had learned how to build these canoes from birch bark, like the
Mm-hmm.
native Indians used to do it all across the northern part of North America. And then I was like, that was like what you were asking for, like some moment like that. And it was kind of like ding, like the light goes on, it's like that geography book when I was younger, like, oh, I gotta go there. Then it was like, oh, I have to do that,
Mm-hmm.
because I remember reading about these canoes in books about colonization of North America, written kind of like in a story style, like sort of like a novel, like building around historical facts, or what seems to be historical fact, or what one knows. And so there was always talk about these canoes made from birch bark. And for me, birch bark in Germany, there was all this flimsy stuff. I had never really actually cut into a birch and seen like how thick is the stuff actually underneath, can you make anything out of it? I didn't know. So, but I had this question in my mind. And then when I saw that canoeing article about building these boats, I was totally like sold, like, because I was also had studied anthropology, and that was my main interest in studying anthropology, like learning about these different technologies that cultures have come up with. So, and then, so doing that, there was so much energy like in there, like maybe fulfilling some kind of path. So everything that happened was kind of happened in that favor. So when you start looking at something in that way, oh, I got to do that, and then things start moving in that direction. And there's not so many events maybe in one's life where it's so clear, because then just soon after that decision, or that wish to do it, like I met some guy there at some sporting store. I was talking about this to that person, and then he was like, "Oh, I know someone has built a boat like that." And I'm like, "What?" Here? Yeah, I can give you his phone number. So I was like, "Oh, okay." I called up that guy, and he was a really friendly guy. There's actually like some National Geographic um, special about, I don't know, when would that have been? From before the 90s, maybe 80s, when him and his family had lived near the Canadian border, like Alaska Canadian border, in some river up in the middle of nowhere. And he had built like several canoes like that. So he was quite willing to share what he knew about it, because I didn't know any Indian guys that knew how to do it. He was an American guy with two or three children. And so he showed me a picture when I visited him in his log house just near Fairbanks, where he was inside one of those boats and with a long stick poling it up on the Yukon River. And they had a little girl sitting in the front, like his daughter. So, okay, when I saw that picture, I was like, oh, I also have to do that. I gotta build a boat like that for sure. So so I did. And also then, interesting enough, like another friend that I had in Fairbanks, when I told him about that, he also said, "Oh yeah, you have to meet Don. I met this guy. I picked him up hitchhiking, young guy, and he had been he's from Maine or something like that, and he come across the kind of like a little bit like Into the Wild kind of thing. He kind of was disillusioned with the life civilization and how they live in the crowded and consumerism, blah blah. And so he came across the U.S., and then he built like a kayak, like a skin boat, like I think in Seattle he built it, and then he was going to paddle up to Alaska with it along the coast. But that was his first boat that he'd ever built, so he built it too small. He hardly kind of fit in with all his gear, and so he only paddled like a short distance with it, and then bought himself like a plastic kayak, and then continued the rest of the trip with it. But this guy, my friend, had picked up hitchhiking in Alaska, and he also had this idea he wanted to build like a birch bark canoe, and had gone down south of Fairbanks on the Tanana River, south of the Tanana River in central Alaska, near the city of Fairbanks. It's a huge area, uninhabited. There's no one living basically on the other side of the river. It's a huge, actually, like military reservation where they test or do flights or whatever they do there, you know. But like, so the river is basically the boundary, and he had just gone into the forest on that land somewhere and built himself a little shack to spend the winter there, and dragged the stove over there and heated it. No insulation, just living in the forest at -40 and with this little stove. And he was planning to build also a birch bark canoe. So my friend Olaf, he told me, you need to meet Don and just go down there and visit him at the river. So in the springtime, finally, when there was still ice on the river, because that's the easiest way to get there. In the winter, it's all frozen. But then when the spring comes and the ice melts, the river is quite big, and you need a boat to get across. And then there's lots of little arms and islands, and so if you don't know where to go, but he showed me where to go, so I went there with a good friend. We visited him, and he said to me, "Yeah, well, why don't you come down here if you want to build one? You come down here and build yours also down here." So yeah, I thought that's a good idea. You know, like then I'm in the forest. Here's all the materials, like the trees, the pitch for to seal the seams, the roots, to sew the birch bark pieces together with, and everything that one needs for a boat, because there was not a nail in the boat. It was just totally like the traditional boat, just made from the materials collected from the forest. So we ended up both building our canoes there in the forest with the mosquitoes. I was there for 5 weeks that summer.
Yeah.
Finished it, took it across, paddled it across, and then we took it on my friend Mary Catherine. She had a Toyota pickup with a big roof rack on it, and then we decided to do a long trip with it. So we drove over from Alaska to Canada, to the Arctic Circle and Yukon Territory that summer, and then we floated down like the headwaters of the Porcupine River, and so Eagle River, then the Eagle Bell River, Porcupine River into the Yukon, and so like 1,200 kilometer canoe trip with that canoe that I built from nothing.
Oh, God, that's a long trip. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was a good trip.
I'm interesting to know that did you learn to make all these things you mentioned, canoes, boats, lodge houses, and whatever? Uh, how much did you learn in school, and how much
Nothing.
different? Okay, so
You
it
mean
was.
like like some actual physical skills?
Mm, yeah.
Well, I was in kindergarten, and then we did things there, cutting out little things and stitching and gluing and that kind of stuff, you know. So that was kind of good skills. Actually, just, you
Early on.
know,
Uh,
but then after that, I don't know what other good skills can I think of?
was it well, obviously yourself uh, being interested and trying, and also, but
Yeah,
did other, or did you learn with other people in the
here's another example. Look at this. I put that on. because maybe we would have this conversation about these kind of things. This thing I made when I was, I don't know, 17.
Oh, really?
The first jacket I ever made. I made it a little bit too tight, so that's why it's still alive. I had never been wearing it, but it's still kind of like a nice kind of a shirt. It's got like a hood that is even like it's got like a liner in it out of a different softer material.
Cool. Really nice.
And so I was always interested in stuff like that and sewing things. And making a birch bark canoe is also sewing things because you're stitching and you're
Mm.
using it all, sticking holes. Like the
Well,
sewing for me started mostly out of a practical thought, like wearing jeans and bicycling a lot and realizing these crappy pants, they always get a hole after just 6 months. That's not fair, not good enough. So I convinced my parents we need to get a sewing machine so
okay.
I can fix the pants. But I didn't. I basically started right away, start making stuff like little bags for the hiking trips. And also that friend with the Coke bottle glasses, he was also into sewing. So we were both, even though we didn't live in the same city anymore, we were still in contact. With every school year, we'd go and visit each other once or twice and plan the next trip to Lapland, like a bigger trip like that one I was telling you about. Next time, oh, there's too many clear cuts here. They destroyed the forests here. We have to go further north away from people, like up to Lapland to the Arctic Circle, and then find some natural areas that are still like the way they were before people came there or something. But he was also interested in sewing, also quite skilled in making his own stuff, pants and jackets. So we both did that kind of stuff, but no, not but living like 300-400 kilometers apart, talking on the phone, and so yeah. But I started in Alaska. I started making stuff like that to sell. Also, I sold it to people. I made
Okay.
boots and backpacks and tents and sleeping bags, like lots of different things. Not like mass production, not at all. Like and hats and gloves, different things that people would say, "Can you make me something like that?" And I'd say, "Oh yeah, maybe I could." I used some old 100-year, or maybe it wasn't 100 years then, but maybe 60, 70-year-old. These machines that you have to push with your feet, foot treadle machines. An old Singer. You only sew forward with those. Maybe like stitch a little bit backward. But everything I made with that, and some of the stuff I still have. But this is just made with a cheap electric machine that my mom still has it in the basement. So when something breaks here and I'm here visiting, and I'll
Nice.
fix it.
Yeah, so you become a somewhat a multi-talented handyman with doing this, mm,
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean,
getting some
it grows.
yeah, and getting some income during the trips here and there.
That was a really good summer for me in that time, building that birch canoe, because in order to find out how to work this birch bark and how do you sew with this, I didn't know anything. I just There weren't really any good books about it then. There was only that one informant that I had, and a book written by some kind of historian about these bark canoes and boats, skin boats across North America that I had bought, and that was that. So a lot of things were sort of not really described when you the book, when you look at it. Oh, it's great, like all these different canoe models across North America, and then that area of the Northwest, because that's not where this guy that wrote the book was. He was more from Eastern Canada. So that type of canoe that they built in the northwestern part was not very well covered, like just a few pages and very scant information. And then from a practical point of view, if you actually wanted to build a canoe like that, that's when you find out, oh well, he didn't say anything about that, and how about how to make this pitch, collecting the resin from the trees, and then he mentioned that they put in like maybe some charcoal and some other things, like maybe some fat, but it didn't say anything about what specific fat or how did they mix, what was the ratio, any of these things, and how to test things, and so it wasn't very practical information. It was more like archaeological, or so you still had to kind of experiment yourself.
Mm.
And I don't think I only built one canoe like that, and I don't think I got it right with the mixture, getting it just right. But it wasn't a big problem because, well, we were out there for 3 weeks, and sometimes that pitch on the seams would crack in the cold water because it's like more flexible when it's warm, and when you put the boat in the cold water, then the stuff gets harder, and then the boat flexes, and then it could get a crack, and then maybe it leaks again a little bit. Okay, well, no problem. You turn it over, and you make a fire anyway, and you have a stone, and you take a stone that's long enough to hold onto it and warm it up in the fire, and then you melt the stuff on the outside of the canoe again, and you're looking like finding some physical cracks in this, and then it's good again for the next day. So it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
That was interesting. Also, like in the middle of that trip, we were going down some section, like still in Canada, like near this the northern part of where the Porcupine kind of gets to its northern point, the Porcupine River, and coming by some hunting camps where or fishing camps, native guys like hunting and fishing, living in these villages up there, and there's no roads up there, nothing like that, and so only river or air you can fly in or you can walk in, maybe if you know what you're doing, or maybe in the winter with a snow machine somehow but it's hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest road. And so we're going down the river, in the middle of the river, paddling. Also, the paddles I made also from some birch, and we had a long pole like that. So we're going down the river, and then there was like some fish camp nearby, and then these guys, they saw us coming there with this canoe, and they were like, "What the hell?" They were all like waving, "Come over here!"
All right.
So, like, "Nah, who built that canoe?" Well, I guess it was me. Uh-huh. Well, we haven't seen any of those for a long time. Maybe none of them even knew how to build one anymore. Who knows, Because I met one.
Surprise for them.
Yeah, it was really good for them to see it. So
Yeah,
maybe they're still talking about it. I don't know.
yeah. Thank you.
Is time getting up again?
Yeah, I I end this recording now.